Well, hi you guys. Welcome back to another episode of Eek Acres. I just fixed myself a cup of coffee and I thought I'd tell you guys about something that really happened when Bridget and I were on a hike. And I wanted to say in this video that this is part of the reason of why Bridget and I have tapered off our hiking. We used to love to hike all the time. I used to hike all the time by myself before Bridget and I even met. And then once her and I got together, even before we got married and after, we did a lot of hiking together. She really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Sometimes we'd take the dog with us, sometimes not. There's been some things that have quietly happened in the background. And what I mean by that is by not documenting it or anything, just witnessing it, not knowing what to think, and then going about our business. And Bridget and I have had several discussions about this because it made me ask Bridget, do you really think it's safe the way you and I are hiking? With no gun, just a knife and bear spray. Do you feel safe on the hikes we've gone on where we've hiked into the woods for miles, you guys? I'm talking miles. We've done some pretty big hikes for a couple our age. And her answer was no. And it's because of the things that we've seen. I remember we went to this one hike that I never hiked before. It was a trail that I knew about and had gone by it over the years whenever I was in that township, and it was always a hike I wanted to do. It's in a wilderness area. It's very remote, very thick woods, like most of western and northwestern Pennsylvania and New York is, and it was a hike I always wanted to do. So one day when we were out in that area, I told Bridget, I says, I know of a pretty cool trail. Would you want to hike it with me? And she was game. And this hike was pretty challenging. It was very steep terrain, very hilly, drop-offs, a lot of gorges and stuff like that, and thickly wooded with every kind of tree species in North America that you could imagine. But we started at the trailhead after I parked and locked up the van, and we went up this series of steps that were cut out of the bank and built with railroad ties, going all the way up this great big embankment, and you get all the way up to the top, and there was the sign-in kiosk for the trailhead. And we signed the papers and continued on in the trail, and it continued to climb. It was an elevation that just kept going uphill. And once we got up into the higher part of this country, of these woods, I came across a fresh, live tree that had been twisted in an unbelievable way. And I put my thumb and my middle fingers together, and that was the diameter of the tree. It was this big around. That's a pretty thick sapling. Just this pipe-like sapling, and it went up at least 10 feet from the ground, so it was way up over my head to where I could not reach where it had been broken, but not broken off, because this was a live tree. It was bent over, and then from the joint of where it got bent over, from there it was twisted all the way down to the tip of this tree that was tall when it was upright. And it had all these limbs and branches coming off of it, and it had been twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted all the way down to where the whole thing looked like rope. And so the trail was like this. Imagine the trail being straight at the top of this great big hill, and the top of the tree was like this. So the tree, the trunk of it was right here off, right at the trail's edge. But where it had been snapped and twisted, it was at an angle like this. So it was actually blocking the trail. And we hiked right up to it. And I grabbed one end of it to drag the top of it off away like this. But because of how it was twisted, it naturally wanted to go back to the way it was. It literally dragged itself back over the trail. The whole thing was twisted, and the bark on the tree just separated like it all been ripped. and I could smell the freshness of the wood of this sapling. I could smell it. And I looked at Bridget, and she looked at me, and I says, what in the hell, as we're looking up at it, I said, do you think did this to this tree? How in the hell is this even possible? None of the other saplings or trees of any kind or any species were touched. Nothing else was touched. There was no evidence of anything else around because we spent a couple minutes looking, really looking and trying to investigate how this one and only tree that was right next to the trail was bent over and snapped, but still connected, and twisted from there all the way down to the very tip of the tree. And even the limbs were just, you could see where they just been rolled and twisted, and some of the limbs were even snapped and still connected with splinters sticking out. This was a live tree, and you could smell the freshness of the wood. And I told Bridget, I says, with a tree that big around, there's not a human being on this planet that could take something of that diameter with its bare hands and twist this tree. But yet that's exactly what it was. It was twisted all the way down. Like this thing had been twisted around and around and around probably 75, 90 times. It was an unreal sight. And because of the freshness of it and how the leaves, it was a maple tree. And when the leaves were upside down because of this thing being all twisted in every direction, they almost had like a silvery look. I'm not sure if it was a silver maple or not, but it had a silvery look to the back side of the leaves, and they were actually starting to wilt a little bit in the heat because this thing had just been twisted. Was not done by a storm. There was no other evidence of any damage anywhere in that area. And so we continued on the trail, baffled by what the hell happened to this one lone sapling right next to the trail. And we hiked it to the other end to where we came to a road crossing before you had to cross Route 39 and continue on the other side into the forest, and the trail just keeps going for miles. And we got to the road crossing, and I looked left and I looked right, and it was nothing but thick forest for as far as the eye could see. And I told Bridget, I says, I think it's best we just turn around and go back to the van. And she says, yeah, let's just go back. She says, I don't like this trail. I didn't have a good feeling. And so on our way going back the way we came to get back to where that twisted tree was, we kept a lookout in the woods. We kept looking to the right and to the left, and we were just watching all around us. I was turning around on the trail looking behind us, and we didn't smell anything. We didn't see anything. We didn't feel like we were being watched or anything. But then when we passed that tree again, and we knew that we were just a short distance to the van and to the trailhead, I stopped and I looked at it again. And I told Bridget, I says, it would take great strength to do what this tree has been put through. There is no way a human being could twist a sapling that big around. And it was thick, that size around, even after the break, and it continued down towards the tip before it got gradually thinner going to the tip of the tree. It still was that thick at the area where it was snapped. And I says, for one thing, I says, what could reach it at that height to bend it over to break it? Number two, after being strong enough to break it at 10 feet up from the ground, and then be able to twist it once you have it down to where it's coming off from where it broke in half, and then be able to just twist and roll the tree and corkscrew it all the way up to where it was busted. I said, there's nobody that has that kind of strength. And she agreed with me. She's like, this is physically impossible for a human to do this. We were baffled, and we knew it was time to get the hell out of those woods. And that's why we turned around, because the more I got to thinking about it, and then when we got to that road, because the road crossing wasn't that far. We could hear an occasional car go by, and the road crossing wasn't too far from where this tree was broke. And that's when I realized maybe it's just best we get out of here and get off this trail and leave. And we haven't been back to that trail since. But we've had 5 things since Bridget and I have been hiking together that we've encountered to where we actually don't feel safe hiking anymore. And we haven't been hiking since. Otherwise, I would have done a YouTube video about it. Once in a while, we'll go to a local hike that's right up the road from our house. That is a 1-mile loop. And a lot of people use that loop to walk their dogs. And it's a pretty safe place to walk in the woods. It's 100 acres. But it's one of the smallest little hikes locally around here. And it's one that we like to do. So we don't mind doing that. But some of these wilderness remote hikes that we've done that go for literally tens of miles in deep into the forest, we haven't done any of those since because of the things that we've seen. Evidence of something that just doesn't make sense. It's like that's humanly impossible. That's not something a storm did. That's not something a person did. It would take machinery to do something like that. That's what it would take. Some type of hydraulic machinery to do that to a tree that's that big around. That big around. That is strength. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but we've witnessed things like this in the woods. And that's why we haven't gone hiking since, because to tell you guys the God's honest truth, I don't have a gun. But after the things that I've seen right along trails that are right there in plain sight and you can't dismiss it, I feel like it's not safe to hike without a gun. And I don't know anything about guns. I wouldn't know what kind of gun to get over another. I don't even know what the gun laws are, permits, none of that. I don't know anything about guns. I would literally have to start from ground zero and work my way up. But I'll tell you what, lately with what I've seen in the woods in western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania, whatever the hell is doing this to trees is strong enough to where I don't want to run into it. And that's the God's honest truth. And Bridget and I have been talking a lot about this lately. We miss hiking. We want to go hiking so desperately. But we've got to be very, very careful on where we go, because we've been seeing things that we just cannot explain. And whatever the hell is in the woods that's doing these kind of things, I don't want to know what the hell it is. I don't want to meet up with it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know about it. But now if we go hiking, we are going to do shorter hikes. Especially with my health now, I don't need to be doing hikes that are several miles long anyway. But we need to find shorter, safer hikes than the hikes we've done in the past. Because when I look back on the hikes we've done in the past, I told Bridget, I says, we were lucky. We were very lucky. We're not doing that anymore. I think the risk is too much. It's not worth the risk to just take a stroll through the woods, because basically when you're hiking, that's all you're doing. You're just taking a stroll through the woods on a public trail. There are some places it's just not worth doing that anymore. But I wanted to let you guys know about that. You tell me what the hell can snap off a tree 10 feet up from the ground and then twist it so the whole thing looks like a rope all the way to the tip, where like I said, it's been done just under 100 times, to where it's been twisted around and around and around and around on something that big around. I have no idea. That puzzled me to no end. This right here, you guys, on our property in our backyard is a Scotch pine. And if I had to guesstimate the height of it, this is all of 15 feet tall. And this is the diameter that tree was, because when I put my thumb and my middle finger around it, this right here is the diameter. There is no way I could get up there 10 feet and then pull even a pine tree over of this girth, snap it off, and then be able to roll the end of it. There's just no way. There's nobody that I know that is strong enough, humanly strong enough to do this. But this is the size of the tree right here. The maple that I told you about was this diameter. Exactly this diameter right here. I could get my thumb and middle finger just around this tree to where it's touching. This is how big it was. And to be able to pull it over, number one, and snap it, and then roll and twist it, you tell me who's got the strength to do that. I know I don't. I don't know anybody that could do that. Not even with a Scotch pine, let alone a maple, because maple and oaks are extremely tough trees, tougher than even pine. But even with a pine tree, the same diameter, I could not physically do it. There's just no way could I physically do that. I don't even know how you would be able to get up high enough to get enough force on the tip to even bend the tree over to try to snap it at the 10-foot mark. How would you do that? And this is the kind of thing that I encountered on a trail, and I've seen similar trees done this way, to where I don't feel safe hiking without a gun anymore. I just don't. I don't know what to make of it. That's the diameter it was right there. True story, you guys. True story. Thanks for watching, you guys, and we'll see you again in the next one. Bye-bye.